Voice of Swami Vivekananda. And the speaker is Anindita Balslev. To say a few words about Anindita, she's a philosopher based in India and Denmark. She obtained her MA in Calcutta, PhD in Paris, on degrees in philosophy. Her educational and professional experience in India, France, US and Denmark have inspired her to create a forum for cross-cultural conversation, CCC. The international CCC conferences that she organizes have led to thought-provoking discussions and publications. She serves on the boards of several important international organizations and societies and is a founding member of the International Society for Science and Religion. Apart from contributing many essays in professional journals in the areas of philosophy, religion and culture, she is an author of The Study of Time in Indian Philosophy, Cultural Otherness, Correspondence with Richard Rorty, Indian Conceptual World, The Study of Time in Indian Philosophy, An Enigma of Eye Consciousness, On World Religions, Diversity, Not Dissension. She is also the editor of the volumes entitled Cross-Cultural Conversations, On India, Self-Image and Counter-Image, and a co-editor of the volumes entitled Religion and Time and Compassion in the World Religions. We invite Anindita to
Namaskar, and thank you so much for the kind introduction. Yes, today I was thinking of addressing this theme, the question of religious diversity today and Voice of Swami Vivekananda. There has been no dearth of speculations with regard to the likely future that awaits the religions of the world. A few decades back, we often used to hear that with the spread of scientific technology and the rise of secular political ideologies, the importance of the religions of the world will gradually diminish. In fact, a more radical version of such a reading was that the religions of the world will simply vanish in the course of time from the face of the earth. However, despite countless attacks from the quarters of skeptics, materialists, secularists, political ideologues that have sought to persuade people with vengeance against the religious enterprise, there is no way of ignoring the ground reality that these world religions are palpably with us till today. Moreover, a worldwide sharing of scientific technology that has facilitated travel and communication in an unprecedented manner has only corroborated the fact of the presence of the plurality of religions to be an undeniable social reality. And it is so, along with the same threats and hopes that have been always associated with the presence of religions. As a matter of fact, Swami Vivekananda was fully aware of these complexities. He said that, quote, "No other human motive has deluged the world with blood so much as religion. At the same time, nothing has brought into existence so many hospitals and asylums for the poor. No other human influence has taken such care not only of humanity, but also of the lowest of animals, as religion has done. Nothing makes us so cruel as religion. Nothing makes us so tender as religion." It seems that both of these propensities are very largely due to the fact that the largest aggregates of humanity receive, on the one hand, their norms and values as well as guidelines for all their this worldly and otherworldly endeavors from these religions. And on the other hand, they equally derive a sense of collective identity that often gets intermingled with socio-political agendas in queer ways. We do in fact witness, although it is not always openly ascertained, that there are many shared values that these religious traditions propagate, inspiring their respective adherents to lead a good and honest life, engage in benevolent activities with altruistic goals, as well as to practice compassion, charity, love, and also seek to institutionalize these values. But it is also an undeniable fact that these traditions have actually influenced the formations of a sense of group identity by generating a sense of fraternity common to the fraternity among the recipients who share these common messages and teachings. These have also been instrumental for separating one group from another, one from the other. This means there is now, we are witnessing the invention of religious identity as a form of social identity. It has undoubtedly enabled us to differentiate ourselves from those whom we call others. It seems that when there are alternative networks of shared beliefs, doctrines, myths and rituals entailing larger visions and missions, these inevitably tend to create a boundary between us and they. Thus, in the face of conflicts, evidently a collective endeavor is needed with a view to promote, first and foremost, an understanding among the adherents of the different religions of the world that entails noting in earnestness, not just imagining, where lies the overlaps and differences in the construal of values. I hope you are listening to this line carefully, that we do not need to imagine what other values have been taught or taught by other spokespersons for other different religious traditions. We need some knowledge today. The challenges confronting such a project are stupendous, given the strong impact of the teachings of the world religions in the multifarious context of which we have historical records. This is also why it is not enough to study the theme of religious diversity solely or simply in terms of metaphysics and ontology, rituals and mythology, even ethics and psychology. Although all of these are very important, their socio-political dimensions also must be adequately dealt with. Today, when we are getting interconnected at an amazing pace on many fronts, the question of religious diversity assumes a critical significance. It is indeed strange that not as much attention has been paid to this phenomenon as it really deserves. You know, the previous Secretary of State of the United States, Madeleine Albright, in her book, quoted, the book is called The Mighty and the Almighty. She quoted a Catholic theologian called Brian Haley, who actually made this point that how little importance is actually being given to this presence of the religious traditions, while even the diplomats are trying to deal with other cultures, other countries. He says that this is a very interesting paragraph. There is an assumption that you do not have to understand religion in order to understand the world. You need to understand politics, strategy, economics, and law. But you do not need to understand religion. If you look at standard textbooks of international relations, or the ways we organize our foreign ministry, there is no place where a sophisticated understanding of religion as a public force in the world is dealt with. End of quote. How religion is used for creating as well as resolving conflict situations is a very apt subject matter for research. In fact, there are many interesting statements by very many great persons in the world connecting these two, and these statements are all open to interpretation, such as that by Mahatma Gandhi, who said that those who say that religion has nothing to do with politics do not know what religion means. Indeed, if only a small fraction of the colossal amount of intellectual and economic resources that are regularly invested in order to serve the cause of violence and destruction, sometimes even in the very name of religion, if these could be analyzed, even a fraction of it in this direction, it would perhaps make our transitory sojourn in this planet somewhat more pleasant and comfortable for all. After all, it may be a human predicament that we have to confront, all of us, a death-bound existence, because of which the Indian Puranas call this world Martyaloka, or the abode of the mortals. But it certainly does not follow from it that a large part of human suffering must continue to be man-made or even inflicted in the name of religion or religious identity. Our helplessness is largely indicative of an absence of political will that need to be awakened today by prioritizing differently the use of our available resources for this purpose. Indeed, the question of religion has been perpetually present, as the previous, this young gentleman was reading from Vivekananda himself. It is the fact that this question has been present in, you just have to turn the page of the global history of ideas and you will see how it has run through innumerable epochs, influencing the course of history of human civilization. These historical developments can be studied and explored both conceptually as well as empirically, noting the role and function of various religious institutions in various cultures. Well, in connection with this discussion, it is very important to recall Swami Vivekananda's statement. He really said that of all the forces that have worked and are still working to mold the destinies of the human race, none certainly is more potent than those, the manifestation of which we call religion. It is still the most important force, that's what he is saying. Now, granted that the theme of religious diversity is crucial, the question is, how do we conceive a project that can deal with this large question? Now, this reminds me of that many years ago, when I was in Calcutta, Swami Lokeshavananda of the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, Gold Park, asked me once to give an endowed lecture, 2 lectures actually, on the theme of religious tolerance or acceptance. Now, after so many years, in 2013, when I was organizing the 150th birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda with ICCR, in New Delhi, Swami Bhajanananda of the Ramakrishna Mission of Belur Math, he actually brought back a new edition of that old lecture to me. And after so many years, I was looking into this. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because already then, I was trying to take note of what kind of literature actually exists that deal with the question of religious diversity. And I found that a lot of effort has been put in already then, but which has given rise to a vast amount of literature that can be classified under 3 categories. That is how I wrote in this little booklet. Now, the first category consists of books which are written by single authors who actually may have or may not have some feeling for their own traditions, but so far as the other traditions are concerned, they are nothing but words of abuse. I came across quite a few books of that sort. And not to speak of today, when you read Richard Dawkins, for example, he plainly says religion is at the root of all evil. Now, this is the category of books. I would say that this is not particularly useful when you want to deal with the enterprise of encounter of world religions. To leave aside, let me look at the second category. The second category works, I found, could be subdivided under two sub-themes. One is again written by single authors who want to be spokespersons for all world religions. The same man is speaking for Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, etc., etc. And the result is that either you find it's formed some kind of hierarchy they have made, where they will end with their own preferred religion. So this is one type. And another type was that written by single authors, but you cannot detect what is the personal preference of the authors, because it is written from the angle of any particular discipline. Like, for example, it could be a historical study, could be an anthropological study, something of that sort. Now, such efforts may be laudable. This may contain interesting and significant insights, but the main limitation of such attempts lie in the fact, and this I want to emphasize, that this is too gigantic a task to take upon oneself, that a single person can do justice to all the traditions. Anyone who is somewhat aware of the bulk of significant works, like let's say the Upanishadic tradition or any tradition you take for that matter, you realize that it is a huge, well-nigh impossible task to be well-informed, let alone be well-versed in all these traditions. Mastery of a single tradition is a big challenge. And then again, to try to represent these adequately. Interactions and collaboration is needed, even to set up a workable frame of inquiry that may facilitate new insights into the overlaps as well as the differences to emerge. In brief, I'm trying to say that what we need is a collaborative project. Then comes the third category, consisting of those works, where actually efforts is made to bring spokespersons of different traditions together. That also I found. But what was the way? Typically, a theme is chosen. Like, for example, they would choose the theme of creation or salvation or any other theme for that matter, and each speaker would speak from the point of view of that specific religion or a denomination of such a tradition to which he or she belongs. There is not much discussion. There is no evidence that there has been any open discussion or authentic exchanges, let alone debates and polemics, or that such things have been even allowed. It seems to me that at a philosophical level, these controversies are bound to happen and they have to be allowed. Now, when I am pointing out the limitations of these endeavors, I have mentioned already 3 categories of literature that exist. I must also add, my intention is not to say that these have not by any means helpful for this purpose. Of course they have been helpful, because they have brought religious traditions closer to each other. But my intent is only to express that more vigorous attempts have to be made in collaboration with scholars and adherents of different traditions, so that such efforts can yield more fruitful results. There must be space for open conversation, entailing careful listening to each other and getting ready to employ conceptual strategies that have not been tried before. I can tell you one interesting attempt that I made in 2013 to do this was the last day of the conference of the 150th birth anniversary of Swamiji, is that I said that we will invite these 4 persons, very eminent persons, but we will not ask them to give a lecture each, but they have to engage in a conversation. So I tried to formulate 4 cluster of questions. It is not different questions for spokespersons of different traditions, but the same question has to be answered by each one of them from the vantage point of their traditions. So I had, for Hinduism, Dr. Karan Singh; for Buddhism, Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama; for Islam, I had Maulana Wahiduddin Khan; and for Christianity, the daughter of Reverend Desmond Tutu, Reverend Enfu Tutu. That session was really very much enjoyed by people. But, we do not create enough events of that sort. These are only very sort of occasional attempts on opportunities that come. But I think that religion is such a palpable reality, and that today is high time, when we are all talking about living in an interdependent world, and we have so little idea about from where most people derive their norms and values. If we have no inkling about it, we cannot really talk about, boast about living in an interdependent world. It is a fact, as we were hearing a little while ago from Swamiji himself, is that, despite the fact that some have considered religion as the storehouse of our greatest illusion, as opium of the people, as a source of livelihood for the priestly class, or as that which scientific yearnings and achievements of recent years must persuade us to leave behind, it is a fact that human beings cannot live without asking some of these questions that are, as Paul Tillich said, of ultimate concern. The technological civilizational model that is shared and aspired globally today has not only made our multi-religious situation poignantly visible, but it is still carrying with it the threats and hopes that religion seem to have always associated with, but now only with greater intensity. Today, the issue of religious identity, I believe, must be placed at the top of the list of, in any public agenda for a re-examination and careful scrutiny, in order to understand, how various societal problems, such as how religious sectarianism suddenly assumes a political expression, how nations overtly or covertly consider one another as allies or as adversaries in the name of religion, how frequently we have seen the 2 parties engage in civil strife even within the same nation, who are adherents of 2 religions or of 2 denominations of the same tradition. This issue is not a matter of indifference to us, and we really must ask, why is it so? You remember that famous statement by Jonathan Swift, who said that we have enough religion to hate, but not enough religion to love one another. You see, the assumed, the embedded perception that is there in that remark is that could we not have legitimately expect that the religions would be our greatest source and the greatest resource for inspiring love and peace? All these traditions seem to say so. Then what is it that obstructs that message to sink in? Whenever there is a riot, I have seen so many of this literature, whenever these spokespersons of such traditions are confronted by journalists, by others, they would always say, no, my tradition has never recommended violence. But then why are you engaged in that? These days, when we are really incessantly we ourselves remind ourselves of living in an interdependent world, it is important to know whether our educational curricula and the public media include some basic information about these religious traditions, from which others draw their sense of identity, their norms and values, as we do from ours. Without that, how can we learn to look upon the religions of the world as our common heritage? How can we at all know whether the messages and the aspirations that are embedded in these traditions have anything whatsoever in common? How do we know without knowledge? By perpetuating stereotypical representations that have sometimes very little to do with traditional messages, do we not allow these traditions to be treated simply as divisive forces? We're allowing. Now, as a student of philosophy, which has been my subject, I have always been concerned with the question, what kind of conceptual strategy one can think of that can deal with the question of diversity of religions. And of course, if you're somewhat aware of the various positions that have been discussed in the Indian conceptual world, you are just amazed to see how so early in time they already had thought about these questions. I won't go into the details and bore you about that, but think about Advaita Vedanta in the Upanishadic tradition, Madhyamika philosophy in the Buddhist tradition, and Anekantavad of Jainism. All of these describe conceptual moves so that it is not difficult to imagine the relevance of the presence of the others. And why, within that domain of that frame of inquiry, why diversity is not to be seen necessarily as a source of dissension, but as a predicament of human condition. Now, I don't know how much time I have already taken. I would just come to now this last part of it is Sri Ramakrishna's famous utterance, Jatama Tatapat, is actually very much in tune with what has been going on from the time of Rig Veda Samhita. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. That line of thinking is again and again reiterated in the Indian subcontinents. But you see, what is amazing, I was telling you that there are this kind of literature available which organize, arrange all different religious traditions in a hierarchical order. But if you check the Jatamat Tatapat, as many views, so many paths, as a strategy, you find that it is not necessarily at all, diversity does not call for organizing any plurality of traditions in a hierarchical order. Where one out of the many has to be preferred, or privileged, or declared as a fulfillment of others, nor does it require that the validation of one implies a rejection of others. These are the advantages, the philosophical advantages of that position. His famous saying, "This, as many views, so many paths," was no hollow slogan, a position born of any political prudence, or a simple reiteration of a live and let live formula. So philosophically, this is a very, very interesting strategy. But that does not mean that people who study cultures look at it immediately as a very beneficial point of view or a benevolent point of view. And an important Indologist, come philosopher like Wilhelm Halfas, for example, I was quite amazed to read his book, very well-known book called India and Europe, an Essay in Understanding, where he actually has said that he blames this reading. He says this is a part of the neo-Hindu inclusivism. Why? He's saying this is a position that claims that Vedanta provided the encompassing context within which Christianity, like all other religions, was contained and a priori superseded. This remark, I thought, was very unfortunate, as it fails to appreciate the idea that a recognition of other persuasions as other paths is not a position designed to win over others. That is not what the point is. But he goes on in that vein, observing that one may even suspect that the development of the idea of fulfillment among the Christian missionaries, in part at least, was a response to New Hindu inclusivism, as we find it exemplified by Ramakrishna, etc. Now, I thought of bringing this to some of you, I'm sure, are as critically aware of what goes on in these areas and will be interested in knowing this. Because in India, what is first of all very important to understand is that what takes place at the conceptual level does not leave us indifferent in actual way that we live. Look at the way Indian pluralism, this religious pluralism in India is not a new idea. Religious pluralism has been practiced in India for ever since that we know. And this whole tradition coming from the Rig Veda Samhita, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, that there really is one and the sages call it by different names. And even the idea that spiritual temperaments of individuals vary, and that for that also one has to always make room for diverse paths that suits different people. This is why all the time Sri Ramakrishna, you find, he is all the time telling that yes, whatever suits one best, one follows that. And he is saying that if you do not do that, if you say only my path has to be accepted by everyone, it is a form of dogmatism. In Bengali he called it Motuar Buddhi. And I always find it very touching when reading how he is talking to Vijaykrishna Goswami, for example. And he is saying that, remember this too. Vijaykrishna Goswami, he was such a respected person of the Brahma Samaj of the time. And to him he is saying this, if you believe that God is formless, because that is what they used to believe in, Nirakar Brahma, then stick to that belief with firm conviction, but don't be dogmatic. Never say emphatically about God that he can be only this and not that. You may say, I believe that God is formless, but he can be many things more. He alone knows what else he can be. I do not know. We're teaching him humility. Now, I think all these ideas, especially the way they have been distorted or misunderstood or misread, there should be open conversations with that. And that is why it is not that one kind of people only we talk among ourselves about others, or we talk to others where the others are not even present, or talk to others where they are present but they are supposed to be passive listeners. It doesn't do. Create situations where there will be real exchanges. When Vivekananda used to speak about universal religion, there has been also questions raised. I remember once I was asked in a conference that why is he so much privileging Advaita Vedanta? He is showing that Advaita Vedanta is the greatest of all. So I said, you have to understand what he means by that. He is talking about Advaita Vedanta as a meta-philosophy. As a meta-philosophy, he is looking for that. And his goal when he speaks about universal religion, he is saying this. We want to lead mankind to the place where there is neither the Vedas, nor the Bible, nor the Quran. Mankind ought to be taught that religions are but the varied expressions of the religion, which is oneness, so that each may choose that path that suits him best. That is what he means. And Advaita Vedanta's this whole stand that this ultimate non-known reality is actually inexpressible. If it is inexpressible, it means any tradition, including Hinduism, including whatever tradition you can think of, each is an attempt to express the inexpressible. Each is a way of engaging in that highest pursuit. This is why one cannot preach exclusivism, then it becomes wrong. He says, another place, listen to his prophecy. Do I wish that the Christian would become Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or Buddhist would become Christian? God forbid. So he is not talking about that at all. He again is saying, I do not mean one universal philosophy or any one universal mythology or any one universal ritual held alike by all. So, all these ideas, I think, are quite relevant if we take the task of bringing religious traditions together with all its socio-political implications and sort of expand the study, broaden the study. We will find the relevance of these two figures of Ramakrishna Vivekananda movement of the late 19th century Bengal to be still relevant. And finally, when Swamiji spoke about the awakening of religious consciousness, also implies the awakening of social conscience. He kept on repeating that what is a Vedantic society? A Vedantic society is not one where you have privileges only for certain people and not for others. So he constantly tried to say that Vedanta is not only the name of a theoretical discourse. Vedanta is a call for action. So access to food, water, education, treatment, whatever it is, it should be open to all. Try to strive to create a society of that kind. That is what they were so much trying to bring forth that vision in front of the public. And this is why he always believed, which he said already in 1893 in Chicago, during the Parliament of First World Religions, that if the harmony of the religious traditions could be created, that would imply that we are opening up a colossal force that would absolutely push us to behave in a way that we will reach another phase, a new phase of human civilization. That is the goal that he was striving for. Thank you.